This is the Palouse country. The Palouse is a narrow strip of land in eastern Washington and northern Idaho. Because of the luck of nature and the hard work of the people who till this land, the Palouse is one of the richest grain-producing regions in the nation. Good agricultural land is a blessing. It's the result of millions of years of work by nature. Good agricultural land is a result of the right, lucky combination of the soil-forming processes of geologic parent material, climate, and biotic formation. Rich agricultural land is a valuable national resource which is now being threatened here in the Palouse and across the nation. Millions of acres of prime farmland are lost each year to urbanization, damming, highways, power lines, and strip mining.
I think there's no more important problem to the United States than preserving its prime agricultural land. I think it will dwarf the energy issue. If the facts are correct, that we only have some 24 million surplus acres of prime agricultural land left, and if we're losing it at the rate of about 3 million acres a year, then in a very short time we're going to have to start moving off of that prime land into marginal land. That's going to increase food prices. Secondly, we know on the international level that the need for food is going to increase dramatically. We're going to have to produce as much food in this world between now and the end of the century that's been produced since the beginning of time. That gives the United States a tremendous opportunity on the one hand. Economically, it could really solve many of our balance of trade problems and whatever if we're able to produce the food which the world is going to need. And secondly, of course, we have to worry about our own people. And if we aren't able to produce the food to feed ourselves, then we will have lost the real core of our economy and our ability to have the lifestyle that we have today.
Although Congressman Jeffords and others have supported federal legislation, the protection of farmland has largely depended on the efforts of local governments, who face many obstacles to initiating effective resource management programs. Noted landscape architect and regional planner Ian McHarg comments on a major land use planning issue.
One of the biggest arguments used by the people who oppose preservation of agricultural land is that land is just a commodity and it should be used for the highest and best purpose. And if there's urbanization, that should take precedence over farmland. And they by and large said that if you lose prime agricultural land, you can always take marginal land and put it into production too. And by and large that was true as long as energy was abundant and cheap. And of course energy is not abundant and cheap, and we've got to recognize...
Whitman County, Washington is in the heart of the Palouse region. Here, farmland is being threatened by growth pressures generated by the expansion of Washington State University and the University of Idaho, associated commercial and industrial development, and various state and federal actions. Elected and appointed leaders are concerned that these impacts may seriously endanger current farming practices and needlessly consume valuable land resources.
Whitman County covers 1.4 million acres. 70% of Whitman County is tillable cropland for production of non-irrigated crops. Whitman County is larger than either of the states of Delaware or Rhode Island. Soil was laid in here by wind during the early Ice Age. Whitman County has a lot of soil known as Palouse silt loam, up to 200 feet deep in places. Some of the fields have produced in excess of 100 bushels of white winter wheat per acre. Whitman County soils also produce 3/4 of the dry peas and lentils in the nation. These soils also raise excellent pasture grasses. Winter wheat is the state of Washington's #1 cash crop, and the state of Washington is the 5th largest producer of white winter wheat in the nation. So therefore, the Palouse soils and every acre of Palouse soils in Whitman County are very important.
Many county officials are active farmers. They have been working with interested citizens for over a decade to balance competing land use demands. They can express the importance of this issue better than anyone else.
I think it's tremendously important to preserve our agricultural land here in Whitman County. For one thing, we have a unique type of agricultural land here. With the energy crisis that's building up, we can produce probably more food and fiber here with less energy than a lot of places in the United States, and we certainly think it's worth preserving.
In Whitman County, we are primarily an agriculture county with a little over 1 million acres of tillable farm ground. Our population is just a little over 40,000 people. We need to preserve this farm ground for agriculture. And to do this, we must have a good, sound, comprehensive plan that will include zoning and restrictions that will enable agriculture to follow their pursuits without interference with people living in the rural area.
If we don't do our planning on a local level, the state and federal government are going to step in and do it for us. For example, a few years ago here, the Army Corps of Engineers attempted a pump storage project which would have put 10,000 acres of farmland underwater. We were effectively able to stop this project and convince them that we couldn't sacrifice that many acres of productive farmland.
Harry Wegner, a farmer for over 40 years and a county commissioner for 11, has been involved at both the state and local levels protecting farmland.
In many instances, a house in the middle of 160 acres of farmland dictates how that farmland can be farmed in fertilization, in spraying, in summer fallowing, and even to the farmers working late at night. So it does present a serious problem.
Whitman County's concern has resulted in an evolving agricultural land preservation strategy. As early as 1969, a transitional zone around the city of Pullman was established to control the growth into the county. In 1974, a large lot zoning requirement of 20 acres was adopted for the county's agricultural land. Then, after several years of study, the county adopted a new comprehensive plan in 1978. This led to a new zoning ordinance that partially implements the agricultural goals of the comprehensive plan. This plan and ordinance recognize the county is composed of some of the best farmland in the nation. For that reason, all residential subdivisions are prohibited in the county's unincorporated land except in designated existing communities. For areas unsuitable for commercial agriculture, environmental performance standards for low-density rural housing have been adopted.
When developing the new county zoning ordinance, the wording of the agricultural district received the most public attention. And you can see from here why that was so. Some of our very best agricultural land lies directly adjacent to land that is not suitable for commercial cultivation. And so we were dealing with the issue of how to allow some rural residential use, but to keep our best farmland for farming. The Planning Commission came up with a requirement for rural residential use that you either have 20 acres, which was a holdover from our old zoning ordinance, or, in the new thought, that you would encourage rural residential development away from the farmland if you allowed it on land unsuitable for farming, but required only a minimum amount of land, that amount of land that would support a sewer system and a water system. So that's what the new ordinance says. On a rocky soil or wetlands, you can have rural residential development on less than 20 acres. However, the Planning Commission also required that you develop with access directly on a existing county road. A 200-foot frontage is required. That was to keep development from encroaching on good farmland and preventing farmers from keeping the traditional patterns of spraying and fertilizing and cultivating the land.
There are two recognized weaknesses that county officials would like to see eliminated. First, the best agricultural land is not necessarily protected by the existing zoning ordinances. The major problem here is the 20-acre minimum, which existed in the old zoning ordinance. The 20-acre minimum has drawbacks. It does not necessarily protect the county's best agricultural land. An individual can purchase a parcel of the area's finest land, put a house in the middle of the property, and take the land out of agricultural use. With the price of land rising rapidly in the city of Pullman and elsewhere in the county, subdivisions of 20-acre lots become more feasible. A developer could purchase 500 acres and subdivide it into 25 lots. This could be done even on a smaller scale, with individuals purchasing 20-acre parcels throughout the county. And the county has no review authority for lots over 20 acres in size. A second weakness is that local policies can be ignored by state and federal actions. This was the case when the Snake River was dammed by the Army Corps of Engineers, flooding valuable fruit orchards. A technical advisory committee was organized to see if these weaknesses could be corrected. The committee was comprised of representatives of local government, soil scientists, professors, and concerned citizens. It met monthly for a year to discuss farmland preservation in Whitman County. Project Director Fritz Steiner outlined the Technical Advisory Committee's role and responsibility.
The university and the city of Pullman and the county are very crucially interwoven. And we're going to try to look at that use that relationship to build some strong alternatives. And really what we hope to get from a year from now by looking at the other communities, and first of all looking at the land, is some alternatives which we can use here, which can be presented to the Planning Commission and the County Commissioners to see what alternatives can be used in Whitman County to preserve the good agricultural land.
The Technical Advisory Committee worked with soil scientists and the regional planning staff to evaluate Whitman County land. The group distinguished good agricultural land that should be preserved for agriculture from untillable land that could serve other purposes. At the same time, Whitman County officials set out to see what other areas of the U.S. are doing to preserve their agricultural land. They were looking for alternatives to the 20-acre large lot zoning requirement as a means of stemming rural development. Harry Wegner and Norm Hatley traveled to the Midwest. The first stop was Black Hawk County, Iowa. Here, where corn is the major cash crop, local officials have developed a corn suitability rating system for identifying the productive lands that are of primary importance.
Our soils are classified in the Standard Soil Survey like all others with the 8 land classes, but we have a corn suitability rating in Iowa that works real well for identifying soils on their ability to produce crops, cultivated crops, over a period of time. We have data collected by Iowa State University and the Soil Conservation Service, and we have identified those soils that can continually produce high-level crops under high management, and then we assign a number to it. We also have the benefit then of a good climate, a soil moisture relationship, and soil particle sizes throughout the profile that make for some soils just being a lot more productive than others, and as such then we assign a corn suitability rating, or we say a CSR, and they range from 5 to 100.
We've taken the figure of 70, and above that we've considered that as being the prime ag land, and we want to set that aside and protect it from various types of development. And below that we have selected certain soils that we will allow building on. On a 35-acre tract, a man can go in and buy a 35-acre tract, and we call that a farm. And our zoning does not apply to the farm area.
Wegner and Hatley next traveled to Wisconsin. There, a partnership has been formed between state and local governments and landowners to preserve agricultural land. Farmers may request, on a voluntary basis, that the county zone their land exclusively for agricultural use. If the county agrees, the land thus zoned becomes eligible for major tax credits to the farmer. The impetus for this program came from a local government. Walworth County officials initiated the program with the support of local farmers.
The support was developed right in the beginning. We asked various farm organizations for their help in laying out the program. A committee was formed from these different groups. They sat down with the board and helped really lay out the entire program. Once we had the program developed to the point where the public should be informed, numerous public meetings were held for the information of the public, and from that point on it seemed to move along and was adopted without any problems.
What effect has your planning here in Walworth County had on the state planning program?
Well, I think the biggest effect that it's had on the state program is that it's showed that a local county planning and zoning program can work, and the fact that the program was in effect and working in 2 or 3 counties showed that this might be a good way to go statewide.
In addition to various state policies and programs and traditional zoning ordinances, officials in the East have attempted many different techniques, such as purchasing the rights to develop property, transferring development rights from one piece of farmland to a less productive section of land, farm easements, and covenants. Chester County, Pennsylvania is located near the metropolitan areas of Philadelphia and Wilmington, Delaware, and has been under development pressure literally for centuries. It has experimented with a rather complicated concept, transferring development rights from one piece of land to another.
The transfer of development rights is still a fairly young concept in Chester County. Birmingham Township probably has the oldest transfer of development rights ordinance in the county, and that's only a little over a year old. There are certain parts of the township that are set aside for development, and when a developer wants to build in that area, he transfers rights from an area that the community wishes to preserve or to keep rural from that portion of the community to the area he wants to build. And the entire township is divided into several sectors, and each landowner has a certain share of these development rights.
Chester County has been aided in its effort to preserve its rural heritage through the involvement of numerous private organizations, including the Brandywine Valley Association. The Brandywine Valley Association maintains successful relationships with planning and conservation agencies throughout the valley in order to bring about the orderly growth and development of the Brandywine River Basin.
The Brandywine Valley Association is actually a private organization, and as such we have very little power. We don't have the power that state and federal organizations do, but we do have the power of persuasion, the power of education, which we can use very effectively. We can go to the local governments, the state governments, individuals, industry, business, and try to promote among them the ideas that we think are important for resource conservation. And by instilling these ideas in the people who can get things done, we do feel that we do play a minor role in the overall outcome. We feel that conservation is a state of mind, and if we can generate that state of mind in the people, then conservation will become a practice.
Not all efforts to preserve farmland have been successful. Burlington County, New Jersey, for example, was unable to adopt its farm easement purchase program. Such a program would have compensated farmers for the rights to convert their property to non-agricultural uses.
In New Jersey, we tried to develop a plan to preserve farmland using the purchase of development easements. We came into the Lumberton area, the area that we're here now in, and set up a field office and talked to the farmers and the landowners in the area. We had about 41,500 acres here, and of that acreage we finally appraised about 5,000 acres. We ended up with about 1,700 acres being appraised, and the farmland owners like Lester here accepting the appraisals and being ready to sell their easements to us. This land included all types of farming, dairy like Lester has, cranberries, blueberries, grain crops, vegetables, and fruits. A very diverse area of agriculture in the state, and we particularly picked this area because it was not only great agriculturally, but it was also under great pressure for development. Mount Holly, Camden, Philadelphia pressures are all here, right in this area. Well, we ended up with these appraisals and these acceptances by our farmland owners, but unfortunately, in the end, we were not able to purchase the easements.
Well, when this first was proposed, a lot of my neighbors were quite concerned about it. They were not anxious to get in. They know what happens when the highway goes through and eminent domain comes in, and they try to get it and cut you up for the lowest possible price. However, most of us had appraisals at the market value, and when we did finally get the appraisals from the state, we find that they were very fair. They came very much in line with what we had suggested as being the correct price. We were quite interested in it because it gave a way to preserve farmland. However, when it came down to a showdown, it was not consummated by the state. The other side of our own township is all subdivided at the present time, and it's just this area is left to remain. And it's been in agriculture ever since colonial days. We're right at the head of Tidewater. They came up on the boats even before Billy Penn landed in Philadelphia. This area was in agriculture. I think most of us would like to see it preserved.
While the people in the East are struggling to protect their farmland, some of the most aggressive efforts to preserve farmland are in the northwestern United States, which is undergoing tremendous growth pressures. The recent development boom in and around Seattle has caused King County officials to become alarmed over loss of their agricultural land. Returning from the East, Whitman County Commissioner Harry Wegner discussed efforts with his friend, King County Executive John Spellman.
Basically, our development rights concept is based upon our belief that zoning alone will not preserve agricultural land in our area because of the pressures of urbanization, nor will current use taxation. We think that with the acquisition of development rights, we can make zoning work here, and we can make current use taxation work here. The concept is that the public has an interest in preserving agricultural land for food, for open space, for a lot of amenities. And if the public has an interest, it should give recompense to that farmer if he gives up his right to go to a more intense use, a shopping center or housing or whatever it may be. And the idea is for the public to vote a bond issue to provide the funds to purchase from the farmer the development rights, which are very similar to mineral rights, which we're all familiar with. And then the farmer may continue to farm the land, own the land, pay taxes on the land, will it to his children, but it is always preserved as farmland. He gets the money, however, that he would have got had he been able to sell it. We think in an urbanizing climate, that's the most efficient way to assure that it's going to stay in farmland.
How were the farms selected that you're trying to purchase these development rights from?
Well, first of all, they were selected in areas with groups of farmers. We organized a number of districts in the county with farm committees. We looked to land that was of a high type soil, at least class 2, that was producing at the present time, and which was facing the pressures of urbanization. Those were the priority areas.
Dairy farmer and former King County Commissioner Scott Wallace.
Well, our committee felt that this was the only way to go. A number of us have been toying with this idea of preserving agricultural land for some 20 years. We know that zoning will not work. It's only a regulatory tool, and it changes with administrations and philosophies of people. We patterned our program after the Suffolk County, New York program, where they've been in the process of buying development rights for the last 5 years. And in the 13 western states, over 50% of your prime agricultural land is located in urban counties. So this idea of saying, well, it doesn't make any difference what happens to the agricultural land in King County or Whitman County, we'll get it from someplace else. But someplace else is having the same problem.
The King County initiative to purchase development rights was overwhelmingly approved by the voters on November 6, 1979. The vote was significant because in this era of tax rebellion, the citizens of King County voted for more taxes to preserve their farmland. Elsewhere in the Northwest, Oregon's Department of Land Conservation and Development encourages local governments to establish agricultural land retention programs. Oregon has provided local officials with exclusive farm use zoning mechanisms to preserve good agricultural land. Oregon officials talked with Whitman County Commissioners Jim Henning and John Henley Jr. about this approach.
Senate Bill 100 was established by the state legislature in 1973 and followed from another act called Senate Bill 10 in 1969, which had set out some general goals for planning in Oregon. Senate Bill 100 established the Land Conservation and Development Commission, which is a 7-member commission appointed by the governor. It also established the Department of Land Conservation and Development, which is the staff to the commission. The charge to the commission was to develop statewide goals and guidelines that would be the state regulations and the state goals for local comprehensive plans and zoning ordinances. And every city and county in Oregon was required to establish a comprehensive plan and a zoning ordinance that complied with the state goals.
Of Oregon's 19 goals, goal number 3 states that agricultural land shall be preserved and maintained for farm use, consistent with existing and future needs for agricultural products, forest, and open space. Benton County is one county complying with this goal.
Basically, the Oregon LCDC goals and guidelines in Goal 3 specifically state in Western Oregon and west of the Cascade Mountains that all land that falls within the category of SCS classifications 1 through 4 shall be preserved and maintained for agricultural uses. In Benton County, this was accomplished by many meetings, particular citizens' participation. Benton County first came into this in 1972. Prior to that, there was no countywide zoning. There was countywide comprehensive plan, and countywide zoning was adopted in 1974. Since that time, or just recently, we have completed an update on that. In the 74 plan, approximately 88% of the land in Benton County was set aside as for resource uses, such as agricultural and forestry. Under the present plan that we're now going into, it'll be approximately 92% has been set aside as resource land. This is land outside of the incorporated city limits.
One of the things we felt was very important, if we were going to discourage residential use out in the farming areas, then we had to provide a place for people to live and a place that public policy was going to say, this is where we want houses to be developed. So around every city, we developed an urban growth boundary, and within that urban growth boundary, any new subdivision or any utilization of the land has to show how that land in the future could be converted to urban density. The urban growth boundary just shows around every city where we have all agreed the city will ultimately grow to. Now again, this is not cast in stone, it can be revised, but we've tried to base that boundary on geography and on the area that can actually realistically be served by urban services, sewer, water, streets. And we feel this is a real support to the agricultural goal to have urban growth boundaries and say this is where we want urbanization and this is where we're going to encourage it to occur.
During their travels, Whitman County officials saw alternatives which could be used to replace the 20-acre minimum large lot zoning requirement. Whitman County officials next turned their attention to the federal government. The federal government frequently does not recognize local preservation policies. This constitutes the second major weakness in Whitman County's farmland preservation plan. County officials asked what the federal government is doing to help resolve the problem.
Well, I've become alarmed at the fact that about 3 million acres of nation's precious farmland is being abandoned every year or being encroached upon. And unfortunately, the United States did not have a coordinated policy to preserve farmlands. Although locally, there's been a lot of activity to do that. For instance, in in my home county of King that they have an initiative to preserve farmlands. But the United States never had a coordinated policy to preserve farmlands, and everybody realizes this is what's happening. And in many cases, federal actions such as grant loan programs for industrial home development, highway programs, power lines, everything that the federal government is active in, just didn't have any policy. And so the act that I presented to the Congress was to establish a policy that would ensure the activities of the federal government are consistent with the local effort to preserve farmland. It's just terrible what's happening to the farmlands, and it just doesn't make any sense. And when 2 or 3 million acres are going every year, you're going to find our production of food is not going to be in excess supply, it's going to be in short supply. We're going to have a tough enough time preserving farmlands as it is without some agency of government, I don't care whether it's Bonneville or anyone else, running roughshod over what the communities want to do. And that's what I'm going to prevent.
Vermont Representative James Jeffords has presented similar legislation in the House.
Certainly, it basically has 3 parts. First, we know we got a serious problem. We know we're going to run out of our prime ag land in the not too distant future. The first part would set up an evaluation committee which would gather all the information, take a look at what programs are being tried around the country, evaluate their success or lack of success. The second part says we have our own federal programs which are interfering very substantially with prime ag land, in fact losing it rather dramatically through the use of federal funds. We want to establish a policy which would say we're going to stop that, and we're not going to use our federal funds to destroy the very basic resource of our country in the prime agricultural area. The third, which I think is the most important part, says we still have some time left. Let's try and solve the problem at the local level. Let's give the states and localities some seed money to try and find out what they can do at the local level to preserve that prime agricultural land so it will not become necessary for the federal government to intervene at that level.
Congressman, what effect will your bill have on your home state of Vermont?
Well, Vermont, of course, and the Northeast itself has probably been the hardest hit with respect to losing our prime agricultural land. And to Vermont, it's the heart and soul of our state. It's the basis of our economy, and it's the beauty that attracts our tourists. We've lost about 2/3 of our farms now. And unless we can find an answer, and the rest of the country can help us find an answer, if we lose the rest of that, to me, we've lost Vermont.
From their local research and cross-country survey, the Whitman County Agricultural Technical Advisory Committee, the Planning Commission, and county commissioners have gained a better understanding of what is being done by others to protect agricultural land. They are now sharing that information with the people of Whitman County, seeking suggestions for the improvement of their comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance. There are several alternatives. The first alternative is to do nothing more, which may not be a bad alternative at this time. Whitman County's new comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance do make up a sound preservation program, even recognizing its several weaknesses. Perhaps this new plan should be given some time before any revisions are proposed. The second alternative is to do nothing more locally, but encourage state and federal agricultural preservation efforts. Additional state legislation could be sought to connect planning and zoning with preferential tax assessments, as in Oregon and Wisconsin. A further step would be to require a conservation plan or preferential taxing, as in Wisconsin. Several provisions of the Magnuson-Jeffords bills offer potential advantages to the county. For example, the requirement of federal projects to recognize local farmland preservation efforts. The third alternative is to make changes locally, but do nothing more on the state or federal levels. The local actions that can be taken include modifying the zoning ordinance to change the 20-acre minimum requirement and continuing education of the community concerning the importance of farmlands preservation. The 20-acre minimum could be replaced with either a larger lot zoning or an exclusive farm zone. A larger minimum that recognizes the size required for a successful wheat farm in the Palouse would help to ensure the protection of the region's best land. This minimum could range anywhere from 400 to 1,000 acres, reflecting the size of Whitman County farms. The other option would be an exclusive farm use district that included no minimum lot size. All land would be used for agriculture, except those required for farming operations and those meeting the performance standards for rural residential land use. A similar district could be created for the county's rangeland. If this option is chosen, close cooperation with the county's Soil Conservation Service office and health department would be necessary to ensure the established environmental criteria are met. The County Planning Commission and the Soil Conservation Service may also look at developing a grain suitability rating system, similar to Blackhawk County's corn suitability rating system. A continuing education effort might also be undertaken. The Brandywine Valley Association in Chester County, Pennsylvania, provides an example of an ongoing educational effort concerned with the importance of agricultural land. By meeting with all types of citizen groups, the people of the county become better informed about the democratic process of planning, and planners gain a better understanding of the community. The final alternative is to take action, both locally and on the state and federal levels. Whatever alternative the people of Whitman County choose, it will be essential that the unique environment and agricultural industry of the Palouse be recognized. The choice for the future of this essential resource of farmland rests with the people, who are really the most important resource of all.